if you're a lady out there that's really looking for a healthy man, first identify what are your needs and what are you looking for. Then identify who do you need to be? What do you need to be? What do you need to equilibrate? What do you need to move through within yourself? Where does your self-worth need to raise? What inner work do you need to do to attract that caliber of relationship that you're seeking, which of course entails another partner as well, another human. And then as a starting point, you may consider some of the characteristics that I mentioned.
We're back, baby, with a brand new season of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. Join us each week as we have unfiltered conversations about how to transform your life. Our mission is to usher in a new era of spirituality where you don't have to be all love and light to live a life of alignment. Here, we honor all of it, the profound and the profane, the magic and the messy, and all things that make you human. So let's discuss the truth behind transformation and be unapologetic in our evolution. From manifestation to money, embodiment to energy, and all taboo topics, nothing is going to be off limits. Are you ready to live a life that feels just as good as it looks? Let's get fucking spiritual. Welcome back to another episode of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so excited for today's episode because we have our very first repeat guest on the show, and that is because his episode was one of the most listened to on this podcast last time, and for good reason. You guys love talking about dating, relationships, somatics, all the things, as do I. And that is what we are going to dive into today. We've got Stefanos Sifandos back on the show, and he is a relationship expert. He dives into trauma, somatics, behavioral science, the nervous system. And we're going to really dive into polarity and femininity and how to create a thriving relationship today. So Stefanos, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here. I'm very honored that I'm the first repeat guest.
You are, yeah. Everybody loved your episode, and I've been on quite the journey over the last 2 years since we first filmed on my own, coming into my feminine essence and working with polarity and all of that. So I'm excited to dive in from looking at from then to now. I think it's going to be a great episode. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So usually I start with tell us about your story and all of that, but we kind of covered that on the first episode, which if you guys haven't listened to it, we will link it in the show notes for you. So I want us to just dive right in. And something that I know you've talked about and with your wife, Christine, have talked about a lot. And I'd love to chat with her at some point too, because I know she's got her own story of how she ended up, finding you and her whole journey as well. But women being so burnt out and exhausted in their relationships, in their life, in dating. And I'd love to hear you speak to why you think that is and what we can start doing about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think if I don't want to be too reductionist, but I also want to simplify very complex relational dynamics, both externally in the world and internally within ourselves. So if I was to simplify it, I could say there's maybe two core reasons. The first reason as to why we get burnt out in all the areas of our lives is because we carry unprocessed and unresolved trauma or pain or fears or unaddressed stuff that causes us to be in protective patterns of defense and survival. That requires a lot of energy and a lot of output, and it's exhausting and it's tiring. So to me, that's an obvious one. And again, you can go so deep into, okay, well, what is my trauma or what is my pain or what are the experiences that I've had that have shaped this hypervigilance or this exhaustion energetic that I run constantly or this need to be perfect, right, which requires a lot of energy, or this need to people please, make sure everyone else is okay, or this need to get it right, or this need to be super successful, or this need to be extreme in my personality because I'm in avoidance of something really big that I don't want to feel. All of it leads to burnout.
Yeah.
The other part, which is maybe a little more specific to the feminine or women, is that as a society, we place a great deal of expectation on the energetic or the principle or the pattern or the polarity, if you like, masculine polarity of success and achievement and goal orientation. And if you're not running that energetic, if you're not living that, then you're not really of value. And no one wants to be not of value.
Yeah.
Right. So we're all going to go really deep into achievement and into creating external success and being validated by our external world. And that can look like having lots of money. That can look like status. That can look like being number one in something, or the top 10 in something, whatever it is. And sometimes there's nothing, let me be really clear, there's nothing wrong with that. Right? There's nothing wrong with achievement. There's nothing wrong with creating external success. But when it's coming from a place of less than and comparison and forcefulness, you're going to burn out real quick because you're not living authentically to what you really want to do. You're doing it to appease the collective because you don't want to be left out.
Yeah.
And if I were to reduce it to, a couple of things, that's where I would start.
Yeah, well, we can really dive into this because that has been huge on my journey. And I think sometimes we can confuse this. And this was even for myself. I started to have the question of, okay, if I'm supposed to be in my feminine, yet I'm a single woman when I was single before I was partnered, I'm a single woman and I have to fully provide for myself. So how do I begin to start to try to be in my feminine? And I'm sure people listening to this also feel the same way. And like, but yet I have to work to provide and I have to be in my masculine. So what would you say, what would be your advice for that?
Yeah, not just work, you've got to kill it.
Yeah.
Like you've got to be the boss babe. You've got to be all these things that maybe that's appealing to you. I mean, and again, I can't speak for every human, definitely can't speak for a woman or every woman. And if that's not what you want to do, but you feel forced in doing that, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So you asked, what do I do? You've got to live true to you. And now that may mean being partnered and surrendering and yielding and allowing and receiving, or it could mean that you do focus on the masculine energetic of creating success and survival/thriving, right? And you're aware of that. And so what do? You create greater harmony in your world by creating practices and circumstances where you can be in your feminine, where you can receive. That means that you allow others to support you. That means that you're in really aware practices of self-care. It means that you're self-nurturing. It means that you're really looking at the stuff that's driving the behavior of needing to be a particular way. And it's also working on your self-worth and self-value. So what does that look like? That could look like, you said you're going to a retreat on the weekend, right? That could look like that. That's self-work, right? You're exploring the inner sanctum of your own being. Whatever modality you use is less relevant than the intention and you being deliberate around wanting to learn more about you, what makes you tick, what's in the unconscious that's really driving so much of your life. And the more you do that, the more you begin to settle into yourself and you stay in your lane, if you like. In other words, you're not living to the tune of someone else's fiddle, you're living to the sound of your own music. Right? That is probably, for me, a pretty powerful starting point.
That's a really good point because sometimes I think these teachings can be taken really literally. And that's what happened for me as well. When I first got into, okay, I need to be in my feminine now. Well, am I not supposed to work? Am I supposed to want to go live on a homestead? But
if you want to do that, though,
exactly.
Like if you genuinely want to do that, then you'll be surprised. Our spirit is so creative and so magnetic, especially the feminine. The feminine can be so magnetic and so creative. If that's what you want, you'd be surprised. The thing is though, that can come at a cost, and it's at a cost of what you're familiar with. You're familiar around being in this world, and being on a homestead may sound really appealing to you, but is it of greater importance than the world that you've created for yourself here? Only you can decide that. No one else can. Yeah. But if that's what you really wanted, that's what it could look like too.
Yeah. It's a lot of self-searching to figure out what is actually true to me or what society is telling me that I should want. And I find that whether that's like, I need to be a big boss babe or now I need to completely dismantle all of that. And I find for at least me personally, I land somewhere in the middle. Like I love doing this and also love being able to receive and practice being my feminine. So question for you about, if I'm a woman that wants to attract a masculine man, so someone's listening to this right now, what are the qualities in a healthy masculine man that she should look for? Say if she's dating, and let's start there and then see what she can do as well to attract that.
Inconsistency goes a really long way when we're looking at healthy attributes of any human, particularly in a man. So when looking for healthy masculine attributes, consistency is a really powerful one. consistency in their beliefs. That's not to say they can't change their mind, of course, but there's a consistency in how they communicate those beliefs and themselves. There's a consistency in how they treat themselves and treat others. There's a consistency in them understanding their values and then showing you their values. In other words, their words match their actions match their words. There's the consistency there. You can even call that integrity as well. And they can take ownership, like radical responsibility, honesty, and truth for their actions if they mess up. And we all mess up, we're human, right? We all say things and do things that can be hurtful towards others. But if that man can take radical responsibility for that, it shows that not only is he confident in himself, it shows that he trusts himself. It shows that he carries empathy. It shows that he knows himself in a deeper way. And so actions really represent all these other characteristics, such as honesty, such as integrity, that can be really beautiful when entering a relationship. Another thing that I would say as well is a healthy masculine man looks after his mind, his body, looks after his sexuality. So has a deep connection to his heart, his sexuality, and his mind. And that means he trains, he exercises physically, but he also exercises his mind and he exercises his heart. And that shows discipline, that shows commitment, that shows follow through, that shows that he knows who he is. And so in my opinion, and it's just an opinion, right? It's just a perspective. If you're a lady out there that's really looking for a healthy man, first identify what are your needs and what are you looking for. Then identify who do you need to be. What do you need to be? What do you need to equilibrate? What do you need to move through within yourself? Where does your self-worth need to raise? What inner work do you need to do to attract that caliber of relationship that you're seeking, which of course entails another partner as well, another human. And then as a starting point, you may consider some of the characteristics that I mentioned.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And when you say, okay, so she needs to start working through some of the things, like where can she start? What can she do? I know you said like you want to start to what you kind of mentioned of like get to know yourself, get to know your traumas. But I even find, and I'll be a little vulnerable here as well, I'm in a relatively new partnership of a few months, and it's the safest, healthiest, most incredible relationship I've ever been in. And it's so interesting because I have done so much work on myself for the last 7 years. And I know my patterns, I know my shadows. I have so many tools in my tool belt and do somatic work and nervous system work. And it's interesting. I've almost found that like our stuff comes up in relationships. So even like for myself and for any women out there that are like, I feel like I'm doing all of the work and I feel like I'm way less triggered about things than I used to be. So looking at like the evolution for myself is beautiful. But yeah, is there any way that like, how do we continue to move through that to make sure that we're showing up in partnership in a really feminine way? Because I find I sometimes go into my masculine and close when I'm in partnership, when I'm getting triggered or when I have a moment. Like, what can we do to like remain open and remain feminine? Because I feel like I'm doing so much of the work.
Well, I think both the feminine and the masculine close. They just close in different ways in terms of shutdown. Again, the richer the contrast is that we're learning by, the more profound the lessons or the wisdom can be. So we use masculine and feminine energies that live within every single human to really just create more contrast, which creates more richness, which creates the opportunity for greater wisdom, embodiment, and consciousness expanding. We can expand, right? So I would say that all the inner work that you have done up to this point keeps you in the game, meaning that it keeps you in the relationship and you react less, or rather the delay between or the space between your reaction. You still may react, you still may shut down, you still may be in your defensive patterns, whatever they may be, right? Everyone's a little different.
Yeah.
But instead of it happening a second in, it happens 10 seconds in or 10 days in or whatever. And I'm not saying that you're withholding deliberately. I'm saying that your tolerance, your window of tolerance is expanded because you've done so much inner work, right? So, and this is really interesting that you mentioned this because I'm releasing a book September 23rd, 2025 with Hay House. I'm very excited.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And it speaks to this.
Yeah.
So it speaks to, as an individual, you've got to do your inner work. and I will go back and I'll address some of the modalities maybe where or starting points that actually go a little deeper, more specific. I'll get there in a second. But you've got to do your inner work. And what your inner work prepares you for is to be in healthier relationship with yourself and the world. And what's included in the world is, if you want it, romantic partnership, is sexuality, is intimacy, deep intimacy, is deep intentionality shared with another human. Now, what happens is when we open up ourselves to that, right, that level of relationship, it can be really confronting. And if you haven't done that inner work, it will rupture really quickly.
Yeah.
And when it ruptures really quickly, you negate or you miss the opportunity to deepen into yourself using the vehicle of relationship as a catalyst for massive growth. And therefore, we remain stunted. So what I'm saying is that you do your level of inner work that brings you to a point where you can enter into union in a healthy way. Then from there, you grow together. So another example, you open a door, like within your own mind, you open a door as you're exploring yourself. And sometimes that space that you open a door to is really just calm and beautiful, and there's no real, further inner work required, and you can hang there for a moment. And then all of a sudden, maybe another door appears, and you think, oh, I'm curious, I'm going to go through that door. And then your inner work begins. And maybe you get into that space and it's a little difficult. Right? There's challenges in that room or in that space. You get through those challenges and you can settle a little bit, and maybe there's a couple of doors now in that room. You think, oh, which one do I go through? And depending on where you're at, you'll choose the door, and it may lead you to a time of peace and integration, or it may lead you to a time of more inner work, right? And so I say that because the work never stops.
Yeah.
There's pauses in between, and there should be space for integration, space for the nervous system to adapt, for the mind to adapt, and to settle, and for the heart to open and to realize this level of self-worth and value. But sometimes it continues for a little longer than we would like. But again, it's longer than we would like. Right? We have to really, and this is the feminine practice of yielding and surrender to the moment. And really, and this is the deep masculine trust of where I'm at is where I'm meant to be. Now, in terms of your question around where do we actually begin? So I like to stack certain modalities that I think are really powerful. So I think inner child exploration, developmental psychology is really powerful. I think combining that with nervous system work and somatic work is really powerful. I value mindset, absolutely. And I'm more about, again, it's more of an individual thing, but I'm more about, can we get into the body? Can we get into the heart?
Yeah.
And when exploring inner work, like most people will start with a book. Nothing wrong with that. It's great. Okay. Some will start with a learn at your own pace course, something like that. Again, great. I recommend that. But at some point, the real work begins. Yeah. Whether you're working with a therapist or a coach, a friend, a group that you're a part of, you've got to be witnessed by other people with love, with non-judgment, with compassion. They have to be able to see you, hear you, understand you, respect you, accept you, appreciate you, because that's often what we didn't get, and that's where what the wound is rooted in. It's rooted in, I wasn't seen, I wasn't loved for who I was.
Yeah.
And so to have a redo of that with another human, whether it be in romantic partnership or whether it be someone, a spiritual guide or a wisdom keeper or something like that, or a therapist, whatever, there's a lot of power in that. And that's where so much of the healing is. It's less about the modalities.
Yeah.
That's the healing. Right there.
That's so true. Because I've done so many, I've done so many online courses and books and all the things. And it's really helpful to have like a frame of reference and to start and listening to podcasts and things like that.
Builds awareness.
It's great, right? And that is step one. And that's what I always talk about here. Is like, you have to actually feel it in your body, being witnessed, being in a group. And the feminine like programs and things that I've done in that nature have completely opened me and transformed me into an entirely different person in relationships, which is beautiful. And I still find myself like getting into the trap of getting it right, and I'm getting it right and softening and being, and it's so interesting. It's such a journey.
And the getting it right piece, I think, is from society as well. Because I think there's always macro, micro, or collective and individual.
Yeah.
School system that we're put in, that we're indoctrinated in, that we're conditioned to about achievement and getting it right and passing and getting A's and B's and so forth, right? And so there's an indoctrination of that, like I need to get it right because then I'm of value. And then there's the other part of needing to get it right, needing to win, and that's more of a masculine energetic that runs through us. And then there's the other part which is a little more individual, around not feeling loved, not feeling worthy, not feeling enough growing up, and needing to get it right, and needing to make sure that we're on top of it, or we're doing the thing that everyone thinks is the right thing to do or the best thing to do. And that wound there, when you look at that, start with repetitive patterns in your life and observe them. Do your best to not judge them, but just observe them and say to yourself, okay, get curious. I wonder where that pattern comes from. And does it really serve me and serve the person I want to be and serve the person that I
am? Wow, I love that. Yeah. I love, last time when you came on the show, we chatted and I was like, I feel like I personally, for me, got so much out of it. And I'm just loving, I feel like this is my own personal session. So thank you.
Feel free to ask personal questions and we'll go deep. The audience will love that too.
They know I'm like so open about everything.
Yeah, I know you
are. Beautiful. Well, actually, I have a question that I know probably a lot of women, especially women looking to call in a masculine partner, might wonder is what traits is a masculine man looking for in a woman? And what can she begin to cultivate within herself?
Yeah, again, can't speak for all men, unfortunately. Or fortunately. I can speak for myself and I can speak for the experience that I've had working with thousands of men over the years. And really, most men are looking for a woman that knows herself, like a confident woman that has a healthy connection to her body, that has a healthy connection to people, that is nurturing, that is compassionate, that carries non-judgment, that is fair in her assessment of the world, that carries non-judgment. That's a big one. Like men feel so much judgment, and to be met in non-judgment and compassion and with nurturing care. They're not looking. See, in the unhealthy expression, a man's looking for his mother, looking for the mother he never had, or looking for the codependent enmeshed mother that he had, right? And that's not healthy. So when I say, compassionate, nurturing woman in her feminine, I'm speaking not the man wanting a mother. That healthy man wants to know that he can put his armor down, that he can be himself, that he's not going to be judged for his past. Again, I'm not asking, personally speaking, I'm not going to be, you have to assess me or feel me on who I am today and how I show up, and am I in integrity, am I consistent, am I matching? But if I'm judged for my past, I contract and I disappear, and I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested, and most men are not going to be interested in that. And so those qualities that I'm mentioning in a woman, that the confidence, the compassion, the nurturing, the empathy, the curiosity, the willingness to want to know about that man, the non-judgment, they're really powerful qualities to have, I think, any human being to be able to hold and meet another human being in. And also requires a lot of inner work, because it means that if that woman is holding for that man, holding space for that man, if you like, right? And she's seeing that man, it means that she has had to do a lot of inner work herself to not be triggered and not be reactive and see beyond the conflict or the challenge that's arising in the moment. Again, I'm being very clear here. I'm not saying just let a man do what he wants and let him treat you how he wants, and you still be compassionate and fair and all of that. No, not at all. We're talking about two healthy individuals coming together, and in moments of vulnerability, can she access that on a regular basis? And is that her disposition, her natural disposition, if you like? And every human has that as a natural disposition to be in care for someone else, right? Because there's something really deep that happens for that man in his heart as his heart opens, that allows us to be more of ourselves, allows us to be truthful and real, allows us to share more and be more open and honest with who we are, and allows us to also give feedback. Is not, it's like, it's a rudimentary term. It's almost, it allows us to be very, very truthful with what we see in our partner as well, and to share that openly, because there's no risk of criticism, or there's a far less risk of criticism. And we know that we can repair, and we know that woman in front of us is going to hold a very loving pole.
Briefly interrupting this episode for a very special announcement. If you are someone that has been loving this podcast, that you love this work, you really are ready to deepen in your own feminine embodiment journey, you are ready to expand your capacity to receive abundance and what you desire in your life, and you want to do it all in sisterhood, and you want to travel out of the country, drum roll, please. I invite you to join us in Costa Rica in May of 2025. We have officially opened the doors for our Costa Rican Expanded Woman Retreat, where we are going to spend 5 days and 5 nights together in the jungle of Costa Rica and just go really deep together in sisterhood. So if you have desired to attend one of the It's Fucking Spiritual retreats and you want to join us in Costa Rica, it is going to be such an incredible time. There's going to be organic food. There's going to be deep workshops and so much bonding and sisterhood and beach bonfires and excursions and all of the things. And honestly, you guys, every single time that I have taken the leap and gone to something in person, my first ever retreat as an attendee was in Costa Rica. And that is where this podcast idea was actually born. And so every single time that I have chosen to take the leap and I've gone somewhere in person alone and nervous and ready for my expansion, there is so much transformation on the other side. It is honestly how I have built my life, has been from taking multiple days to go really deep, to receive reflections in sisterhood, and to really claim what I want out of life. And I invite you to do that with us if it's something that's calling you. This is by application only. So definitely go and fill out the application in the show notes. There's going to be so much information about the retreat, the dates, pricing, all of that in that application, and go and take a look. And if it's calling you, definitely apply. Even if you're on the fence, definitely apply and we will review your application. And if you have any questions, you can email us at support@rachelgibler.com. And we hope that we will get the chance to meet you in Costa Rica in May. Yeah. And all of this feels so nuanced because
of course it is.
You know, and it's like not going into being so hard open, but then also how do you name, like, okay, where I'm going with this is they say, you know, really, or a woman in her feminine and in her feminine power can really inspire a masculine man to rise. What does that actually look like in practice? How is she, I know she's showing up heart open, but also say if someone's like in a relationship and they're listening to this right now and they have a good man, they're in a healthy relationship, but they see this man's potential or they see what he could step into in ways that he might not be. And she doesn't want to fall into being criticizing, but then how does she handle, you know, still being heart open while, like, how does she get to inspiring him? What does that actually look like?
I think there's a number of ways that happen. So firstly, having very clear communication and agreements in place on how the couple communicate with each other around difficult topics or around conflict and challenge. Also, is there an agreement or is there a conversation around that man trusting his partner's intuition and trusting the way that she will deliver it? And if she doesn't deliver it in the quote unquote best way, can they just repair from that? They're the agreements. They have agreements around conflict. They have agreements around challenge. They have agreements around repair. And so a mature, healthy couple are going to speak to that proactively. And so there's a preparation in place, right? Now, there may be times where she delivers the message perfectly. And from her end, there is no intention or even action of criticism or harshness or anything like that. But he may be in a mood or he may be overwhelmed or he may just receive it in that way because it reminds him of his mother or his father or something else that isn't necessarily repaired within him. Again, do they have agreements around how they communicate if they need space or how they communicate to each other if they're being reactive? Or do they have a quote unquote safe word where if it's getting too heated, someone can maybe put a fist up in the air or something and say, hey, that's symbolic of we need some space. Let's come back to it when we can communicate in a healthier way because my intention wasn't to ignore you or to criticize you. Maybe they use the imago dialogue or maybe they use NVC. So they have communication tools, right? All of that is just doing your inner work. Like all of that is working together in the relationship. And so to me, it's less a matter of having to tiptoe around how you communicate something and just being really clear in the agreements that you have and then committing to those agreements, of course, in how you communicate and how you share yourselves. Like if something feels a little too much, say, hey, it's too much right now. I'm not here. I can't receive it. I can't hear you because I'm pissed off. I'm angry. That's it. So I'm going to need half an hour or I'm going to need an hour or whatever it is, right? And so I think that can be helpful. And again, knowing that, and there's a level of non-attachment that has to take place. So specifically from the woman that is wanting to pull her man and see. So let me actually go back a second. You mentioned potential. That woman needs to be really clear that she's not in love with his potential and that she's seeing his actions as well. And they're very visible.
Yeah.
And I should say actually that if she is loving his potential and he's not in that acting place, and she needs to trust her discernment and intuition that that potential is manifesting or that potential is on its way. And it's very clear that it's on its way. And that's her discernment, right? So I think that's an important thing to say. And if she's wanting to really pull him forward, as she gets to know herself and as she gets to know her partner, she'll know when the right time is for that. Right, meaning the most aligned time for him to really receive it. And if he doesn't, that's okay. It's all learning. Like this is all school. Like life is school. Life is learning. Like you're not gonna always get it right. You're not gonna hit the bullseye every time. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. It's something that I've been doing in my relationship now that has been really helpful. And I know you mentioned like inner child work, and I imagine some of that's internal family systems that you've done. And that's a lot of the work that I've done myself. And I talk about it on here. And something that I'll do, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. It's like anytime that I'm feeling triggered or upset or like anything in a relationship that's coming up for me, I say a lot of times before we do the work, we think that is us and that is the truth. And we are so blended with that part of us that we just think that's how it is and that's how I feel. And I've started to really be able to decipher and sift through, this is a part of me that's feeling this right now that's probably a younger part, and communicating from that place. So I'll say something like, I'm noticing that a part of me right now is having the story that this is what's going on and I'm feeling, and I'll get to the feeling that's underneath the like anger, like I'm feeling fear because I'm feeling rejection, and it's so vulnerable and it's so, it feels tender to do that, but I've personally noticed it's helped my relationship a lot. So I'd be curious your thoughts on that kind of communication.
I agree. I resonate. I think it's great. I think it's very clear and clean. I think it's beautifully vulnerable. Every time we practice vulnerability, we create greater resilience and courage. We lessen shame and we increase our self-worth. I mean, I wouldn't add too much to that other than just to reiterate that we are not our thoughts, that we are not our feelings, that they are an expression of something that is witnessing that, and we are the unchanging witness. And that's not my philosophy. That's Advaita Vedanta. That's non-dualistic philosophy, right? And if we can remember that more and more, it's such a paradox, but there's this separate, because the whole thing of it is there is no separation, but then becomes a separation of the unchanging self with the thing that we're expressing, which is just an extension of us, which is actually not different, but it is different. Yeah. It's just such a paradox, right? But we don't then become those feelings, and we can just let them move through us. So I'll call it animation. So animate externally what you're experiencing internally. So if you're feeling anger, move the anger, right? Name it, like you just said. I'm experiencing anger, or I'm having the experience of anger, or I'm feeling anger, then animate that, give it movement. This is a somatic work, right? It could be breath, it could be whatever you need. Again, discernment is very, very helpful here. Trust yourself, be curious about yourself, be discerning, and then take action on it. And then move that energy, and then check in with your body, check in with yourself, check in with your mind. Do you feel different? Okay, great. If you do, then different how, clearer how, and then act and live from that place.
Yeah. So much of this is simple, but it's not necessarily easy in practice and moments. And if somebody's dating or they're in a relationship right now, like how would you say someone can discern if they found the one, if this is the right person for them, or do their values align? Like, how can somebody tell if this is somebody that's right for them?
People just need to keep getting curious, continuously. Don't get complacent in your life or in the relationship. Continue to be curious, continue to explore your own self, continue to wake up every morning and choose the relationship and choose your partner. Be really clear and discerning about that. Work with the fears that you hold within you around intimacy, around relationship, around this particular relationship, around it working, it not working, and so forth. Like it's all again, it's all school, so to speak. It's all an opportunity to grow. And at some point, you've got to also trust yourself, right? And if you're not trusting yourself and you're in constant oscillation, well, that's telling about something. It's telling either maybe the relationship isn't for you, or maybe that's a pattern for you to feel that oscillation. And there's some inner work to do around that. So there's no one size fits all or one particular technique that says, hey, if you do this thing, you're going to know that the relationship is for you or not.
Yeah.
It's a constant practice, and you've got to get curious. And in order to get really curious, you've got to clear as much clutter and trauma from your system to allow yourself to be in a state of thriving that allows curiosity to then be expressed. Because curiosity can't be expressed when you're in survival mode. You're too myopic in your view of the world. You're too vigilant.
Yeah.
And so again, be responsible for nervous system regulation, for somatic practices that ground your body, that help you feel safe and open, so that you can be really clear in the assessments or the inquiry, exploration that you're making about yourself.
Yeah, nervous system is such a huge one. I feel like that getting into the somatics in the nervous system is the thing that changed my life above everything else. I had journaled and meditated and done all of that for years and years. And then once I got into that, that's when everything started to
There's
shift.
an unlock and a release that comes from deep somatic exploration.
Yeah.
The body is, that book, The Body Keeps a Score. It doesn't only keep the score. It really, it either liberates us or it contracts us. And we get to choose, on a moment-to-moment basis, but also at a macro level as well.
Yeah, I've never heard it said that way. That's beautiful. And I've also heard you mention that you don't think a woman can ever be too much in her masculine. What does that actually mean to you?
That a woman can never be too much in her masculine? I've said that? Okay, interesting. I've got to think about that now.
Jill sent that to me.
She did? Okay.
Yeah.
A woman, I've got like a head block now. Hold on a second. A woman can never be too much in her masculine. So I probably have said that, but I don't know. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't.
Stumped you.
But let's explore it though.
Okay,
right?
great.
So when I hear that, I think about the individuation or the individual expression of any human, in this case, a woman, at a particular point in her life. So what I mean by that, what I mean is that maybe in those moments, it's not about too little or too much. It's about exactly what's needed for her to continue to live the path that is meant for her. So if I was to be a little more specific, maybe the masculine energetic that she's finding herself in is coming from a defensive posture because she's scared, right? And she's protecting herself. And so in that case, if she's protecting herself, she's not too much in her masculine. She's doing exactly what she needs to do to be safe. Now, if that becomes a repetitive pattern and she's pushing people away, yet she has a conscious thought and value of, I want to be in an intimate relationship with a man. I want to be in a healthy relationship, yet she then gets too much in her masculine that ultimately pushes that healthy masculine man away or doesn't attract him. That's not bad or good. That's great because, well, it's great if she can recognize that and becomes aware of the pattern and then can go, oh, wow, here's a pattern that maybe isn't serving me. Let me go into it and be with this so that I can heal it, feel more whole, and live from a different disposition. Does that make sense? So that's what I would probably say to that statement that I did or did not make.
I had it as a question, and I thought that was interesting. Let's dive into it. So when I think about like masculine and feminine dynamics and a lot of what when I feel into that, I think a lot of like before we can come into union with someone outside of ourselves, like in partnership, we have to come into inner union within ourselves.
Yeah.
So, our healthy feminine and our healthy masculine, how can we know that we're in inner union with that? And I'm sure it's obviously an ever changing and evolving and it's a practice, but what does that look like?
The first observation is extremes. So if you're noticing that you're actually not in extreme expression, that's a healthy sign. Example, if all you're doing is working 18 hours a day and you have been for years because you're obsessed with accomplishing a task or success or something, chances are there's not much space for self-care. There's not much space for being able to receive from others. There's not much space for you to be in a feminine energetic. Likewise, if you're constantly, quote unquote, going with the flow, you're not being decisive, you're not being clear in your direction, and you're living from a place of confusion, then there's probably very little space for your masculine energetic. So it's less about balance and it's more about harmony. And the distinction is that balance is a little more forceful, where you're trying to create equal expression, but that's not very organic and that's not very natural. Harmony is when, in this instance, in this context, when you know yourself so well and you're on a journey of deeper self-awareness and self-realization that you know when and how to be in your masculine and or feminine when the time calls. Another example of that could be you're a leader. Are we all leaders? And we all actually need to learn to be led as well. And the mastery of that union or that harmony is knowing when to lead and knowing when to be led. I mean, you look at military special operators, right? When they work in certain units, they know when to lead and they know when to be led. They know when to be, another term, and know when to be in their masculine. They know when to be in their feminine. They know when to be active. They know when to be more passive. It's the more you know yourself and the more you know your environment, the more adept you are at making that decision for yourself. And the more you practice that, the more natural it comes to you, the more it becomes part of your natural organism and expression in the world.
I love that answer. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, another question came through me, and it's actually a more personal question. So you mentioned you won't have extremes. And
I do.
Whoop.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Let's get
Okay,
real.
excuse me.
I can definitely be extreme.
Okay. Or it sounds like that there's less extreme.
I'm definitely less extreme and volatile than I used to be.
Okay. Same. Yeah. And so I would take that as a win.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
I'm winning.
We're winning. And that could look like you don't blow up in the way that you used to blow up when there's a conflict, right? Or you don't completely retreat and run away and sabotage the relationship out of fear the way you maybe used to. So I'm imagining these are some examples. And what's so interesting, and I'll share a bit about my partnership now, which he's given me full reign to talk about. I'm experiencing a very new thing, which is we don't have the like extreme, explosive, euphoric type of like honeymoon love that you think you'd have at the beginning. We were friends first, and that developed into something more over like 8 months. And it's been this not like, I'll put it this way. In my early 20s and mid 20s, I would have this experience of like, this person's the one. And then I would get so wrapped up in it, and then it would inevitably fail. And as I've gone on my journey deeper and deeper, I've become a lot more discerning, a lot more grounded. And I've approached relationships. I did a year of celibacy, I've been on a whole journey. And this is like a slow evolution of depth and love. And it's not for a lack of love for each other. It's not for a lack of depth. It's not for a lack of connection or fun or attraction. We have all of those things. But sometimes he and I even find each other looking at each other like, we don't have this crazy euphoria, but we love each other so much. And this feels so healthy and so grounded and so communicative. But it's not extreme. So I'd be curious, does that just mean that we're in a healthy relationship that doesn't activate our patterns and nervous system? Or, I'm always like, what can someone do? Or I guess you can tell me, like, what is that an indicator of?
To me, that's an indicator of that you're not predominantly attracting from your trauma or unprocessed trauma, and you're attracting from a healthier place.
Yeah.
For sure. And because we're so accustomed to things, we're so accustomed to generally attracting from trauma. And so the attraction needs to be really euphoric and explosive in order to stay together. Otherwise, we wouldn't even bring that person in our lives. And the reason we bring those people into our lives is to grow and learn and have a redo of a past experience or set of experiences and a pattern where we can actually feel empowered, not disempowered. But in order to do that, you've got to have a massive magnet or attraction. And then once that wears off a little bit and the truth or the wholeness of the person or the people start revealing themselves, that's when the inner work begins, right? And that's where the opportunity for freedom and deeper connection begins as well. When you attract from the place that you have, it shows me that there's you're attracting from less trauma, less intensity, less unprocessed, unresolved stuff.
Yeah.
And more from a place of maturity and health. The other reason why that's one that I mentioned is because it's unfamiliar, so that's why it's a bit weird and strange. And the other reason is because as a society we prioritize peak experiences.
Yeah.
But we prioritize orgasm as opposed to, as an example, as opposed to foreplay, right? Like we prioritize the peak experience, the Tony Robbins 4-day peak experience event, or the ayahuasca, or whatever it is, over the slow burn, the slow growth, right? Because we deem that, or we perceive that to be boring, but it's not.
Yeah.
And we need both. We need peak experiences that shock us out of our system, or shock us out of the patterns that we're in. And then we also need more gentle, slower experiences that help us navigate and see the world through a slower lens that helps us integrate in a different way. So we need both, right? And I would say don't necessarily doubt the health or the efficacy of this relationship just because it's not how it's been in the past. Carl Jung would say to us, if he was around, he would say, you don't do your 40s like you did your 30s. You're not growing that way. You don't do your 50s like you did your 40s. Or you don't, you mentioned your 20s. Great. That's what you did in your 20s.
Yeah.
And you spent some time learning about that. And it's a beautiful experience, and it's giving you contrast, and it's giving you something to look at and go, oh, okay, that's not necessarily what I want and what I have now, and that's actually a healthy thing for me. But wherever you're at now, you don't necessarily have to do it the way that it was done before.
Right.
Just because it was done that way.
It's a good point. I turned 30 and then I met him. So my 30s are different.
There you go.
Yeah. It's just so interesting because I think, and as someone that does this work a lot, I'm constantly looking at different things and looking at it from different angles. And I think just as human beings, we assign meaning. And so he and I we're so open with each other, and we'll have these conversations of like, this is so interesting, and we're making it, sometimes we'll make it mean like, is something missing? And then we're like, but not at all. We love this. This is great, but it's so new. And it's almost the nervous system, or like the inner child is like looking for things, and it's not there. So it's just really a really interesting experience that maybe healthy love for the first time is different.
And it is. And check in with the parts of you that are maybe feeling some confusion or some angst around it not being like it's always been. And maybe that's another beautiful opportunity to connect to a part deeper within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. I love that. Yeah, and it's just interesting to have the experience and to both be talking about it and to be so open about it. And it's beautiful. Well, tell us, I know you've got some programs coming up, Love Magnet, for 3 days. Tell us a little bit about that program and what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah, it's a free 3-day workshop, and we'll be speaking to much of what we spoke to today in terms of deeper healing within self. There'll be somatic work that's part of that as well. There'll be an opportunity to really understand. We're going to bust some myths around dating, relationships, and intimacy with self and with others. And we're going to share, like 5 big myths that people, they just keep playing out over and over again, and then wonder why they're so dissatisfied with their lives and with relationships. And we'll speak to attraction dynamics as well, and some dating principles, and like really healthy dating principles, and how to get to that place. Yeah, it's a beautiful 3-day workshop. And that will be, you probably know better than me when that is. It's
February 11th to 13th.
12th, 13th, that's right. Yeah, so I always get confused. 11th, 12th, and 13th, that's right. So we're excited about that. It's going to be a great
beautiful
workshop, yeah.
Oh, I'm excited too, because I'm going to tune in, and I want to hear the myths and all the things. And we will have that in the show notes for you guys. So definitely go sign up for the free workshop, Love Magnet. Join us. I'll be there as an attendee as well, and come learn about dating, relationships, all the things. If you want to actually apply what we talked about to your life in a deeper way, I think it's going to be huge. And I just love your work. And thank you again so much for coming on the show and for giving me my free therapy session today.
You're very welcome. And I will say as well, we'll leave you with a lot more tools and techniques as well in that 3-day workshop too, to actually go and apply into the world.
Yeah. Great. Beautiful. Stefanos, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right, you guys, go tune into the show notes and sign up for that free 3-day workshop if it's calling you. And as always, share this episode with someone that you think needs to hear it. And I love you guys, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so glad that you're here. And if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to share this with a friend that you feel needs to hear it. And if you are really feeling the love and support for this show, this podcast thrives off of your listens and your reviews. So I would love if you could leave us an honest review. We would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, and it helps us get this podcast in the hands of more people and would mean so much to me to receive your support. So thank you.